Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Coffee and Chat. My name's Caroline Walton. I'm the Head of Endpoint Assessment for ELS. Today I've been joined by Ange Garner, who is the Head of Learning Support for Warminster School. Good morning, Ange. Or good afternoon it is now.
Good afternoon, Kaz. Great to be here.
Good. Thank you so much for coming on today. I think what would be really nice, Ange, is actually if you do a little bit at the start to talk about what you do at the school and a little bit about the school.
Of course. So I'm the Head of Learning Support at Warminster School, which is a small school, a small independent school, about 400 pupils, day and boarding, and we're based in Warminster. So I took over the role in September, having been a teacher at the school in the Learning Support Department for a couple of years before that. A very different career, dare I say it, from a 16-year career as an education officer in the British Army, but I've settled into it well and love working there, love working as part of the community.
Good. And what sort of, how large is the number of staff you've got at the school? Is it quite a big team?
So in terms of the Learning Support Department, it's probably, we've got 3 teachers, 3 learning support assistants, and part-time clerical support. Yeah. And then there's a head of learning, a Senko over in the prep school as well.
Mm-hmm. So just for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, if anybody would like to send in any questions, please feel free. We have a chat that comes up, and Sonia, who is our project support, who's helping us man this presentation or webinar, will make sure that we get those questions answered for you. Now, Ange, you and I, we started talking briefly at the end of last year, and the reason I wanted you to come on today really was because you said to me that the school takes apprentices, which is brilliant. I love that. I love that news, because I'm definitely somebody who supports apprenticeships, which is a good job considering I'm head of an endpoint assessment department. Now, I would like you to tell us a bit more about the school and the apprenticeship programs that you run. So how many people do you have on the apprenticeship programs at the moment?
So we've got 2. Okay. We've got one lady that's on the level 3 apprenticeship, LSA apprenticeship learning support assistant, mm-hmm. And another that is doing the level 2.
And are they those 2 standards? Is it always those standards that the school support and take apprentices on?
It is at the moment. So we sort of almost started, the apprenticeship programme is very new for the school in terms of the learning support department, and we only started with apprentices in September 2019. Okay. And we started with the level 2, but found that we needed somewhere to progress, and that the level 3 is actually the best approach for us, yeah. the best standard for us to use.
Oh, that's brilliant. And these were the apprentices, were they specifically taken on to do the apprenticeship programme, or were they existing staff at the school?
Yeah, no, they were specifically taken on to do the programme.
Oh, perfect. Now, I had lots of questions I prepared in my head as well for what I want to ask you around the apprenticeships. So the 2 new apprentices, they started in 2019. Are the 2 you've got on programme still the same original 2, or is this a new cohort?
So in September 2019, we started with 2 level 2 apprentices.
You said that, yeah.
One of them left in July, and the other then transitioned and started the level 3 programme in September in 2020.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Then recruited 2 additional level 2 apprentices in September, or to start in September, all of whom are on an 18-month programme.
Yeah. And how have you found at the school? So were you in, did you have any of them on the old frameworks, or are they all on the brand new current standards?
If I'm being honest, a lot of the frameworks, the standards, I don't have a sort of day-to-day hands-on with that. Okay. We go through another provider who sort of manage the content and support the learners. All of our apprentices do 1 day every fortnight in a local college, and get support with the standards, and then we support in school by mainly providing the time, but obviously any help that they need, they come and have a chat, and we sort of see how they're progressing. But I don't get involved in the detail of the program itself.
Okay. Now it's really interesting to hear, because you take on the apprentices for the duration of their program, don't you? And
Yes.
I know that you, when we were talking originally, you said that I mean, first of all, I think the fact that the school takes on apprentices is fantastic, like I said, and it gives people such an amazing opportunity for people who are both entering the world of work. You know, it gives them new skills, new knowledge, enhances their abilities. They learn lots of new things. And obviously they've got the off-the-job training part of that as well. How do you find that kind of, do you move them around different departments to help them experience different parts of the role and the school?
Yeah, definitely. So their day-to-day role, they split it. So part of the time they come into the learning support department and they run what we call study support sessions. So pupils who are struggling with learning needs, maybe they've got dyslexia and they need a little bit more time to work independently, to catch up on prep, to consolidate work they've been doing in class, and perhaps they found a maths topic difficult and they want some extra support with that. The LSAs are there to support them in a small group, in a safe environment, where they can feel comfortable and open up to them. So they have the skills to support them there, but also they are prioritised amongst classes and pupils with learning difficulties across the school to to support individuals or to support small groups in what we call almost like the front line, in the classroom. Not necessarily sat as like a bolt-on next to them all the time, but maybe sat at the back of the class or nearby and just coming in to help as and when required. So brilliant. By doing that, they're getting experience across all the departments in the school. Maths, science, English are the main ones, but obviously they get involved in other subjects as well.
No, that's great to hear. Because I know when we spoke originally, you said to me that there are a couple of people you'd spoken to who think it's a great idea that the school takes on the apprentices, but I'm sure you said they were always disappointed because they felt as if, because with your apprentices, you don't always offer a job at the end, do you? Sometimes you let them complete their full program, have their full apprenticeship, and then they move on. So you said you'd come under fire from a couple of people from comments that have been made. Well, you should give them a full-time job at the end of it. What were your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it was a bit disappointing. Well, I was a bit taken aback, if I'm being honest. I'd reached out to a networking group because I was trying to recruit we were trying to recruit an additional apprentice, and I wanted to know if anybody opened the opportunity up to people within that network. But I came under fire because of the amount of pay that we give to apprentices, and the fact that this wasn't supplemented by the school. And it did make me think long and hard, because it is a low rate of pay. But then I thought, well, actually, apprentices are working with the school throughout the whole academic year. So Easter, half term, summer holidays, Christmas, it's all, they're still on our school's book and still getting paid throughout that time.
Yeah.
We also give them lots of support in terms of, the training. There's an awful lot of sort of training involved, whether it's the basic safeguarding training, whether it's online courses, whether it's the support for what they're delivering in class, the support for how to support learners with specific learning difficulties. So there is quite a lot of training involved to get our LSAs to where they need to be to give the best support. And of course, it's then opening up an opportunity for the future, where they've had experience within a school environment. They've seen how teachers teach because they've been there watching them. and they can decide, actually, is this a career for me? Is this a route that I want to take? And also they're a known entity, so maybe it opens up options should a full-time position be available in the future for them to sort of apply and have the experience to make their application much stronger.
Yeah, and I think what you said is absolutely bang on. I remember when I did my apprenticeships back in 1997, something like that. You know, that for me, I remember going to do my first degree course, and I dropped out. It really wasn't for me. I really struggled to pass an exam, and I remember coming home to Oxford feeling really quite disappointed. I thought my parents were disappointed in me, and for me, I went to a local training centre. I, at that time, had a training credits card, and I went to a training centre and said, look, can I do anything with this? It was a training provider. And they said, well, actually, yes, that entitles you to this £2,000 worth of apprenticeship training. And this is how I got involved with apprenticeships. So I went to the training provider. They did their initial assessments with me, the maths and the English assessments, which all learners do. And gave me kind of an interview. It wasn't that formal, but it still felt like a proper interview. And they kind of married me up with a very small family-run business that literally hadn't even opened. It was a fantastic opportunity for me to work with a very small business right from scratch. And I can remember going in, even helping to paint the business, the walls, and you know, different things like that, and literally get involved from the start. But that again was for the length of the apprenticeship. There was no guarantee there was going to be a full-time job at the end of it for me. Now, luckily for me, I completed my first apprenticeship, and then, like with your own staff and your own apprentices, I was able to progress and do another one. So for the full time as I was there, I've got so much to be grateful for, because I learned so many different skills, you know, competencies, knowledge. It helped me to really appreciate the world of work. I got to experience a lot of challenges, lots of highs, lots of lows. And actually, as an apprentice, even though I was on a very low apprentice wage, and now back then it was like £7,800 a year. So I completely understand the bit around the salary. But even though I had that lower salary, I had all those opportunities like you've just talked about. So when I moved on afterwards, I wasn't bitter. I didn't think I'd been shortchanged in any way. You know, it was a fantastic experience. So, you know, when an employer takes on an apprentice and gives them that commitment to give them that experience for the full amount of time of their apprenticeship, it really frustrates me when you hear other people then criticise that employer because they haven't then given them a full-time job. Currently,
I can understand why the criticism is there. I do understand, and that's what I was sort of toying with myself. You know, was it morally right to be paying such a low salary for the hours? But then, from an employer's perspective, if I wanted to, particularly in the current climate, I could easily recruit LSAs on, you know, that are not on the apprenticeship programme, and fill those posts with people that are far more experienced. Many years ago, when I was making the transition from my previous career into education outside the British Army, I started work at Warminster School as an LSA. And I was interviewed. Well, there were 8 or 9 applicants, and I think 7 of those were actually professionally qualified teachers, one of whom had driven from Wales to Warminster just for the interview, and that's for a job on the minimum wage. So I was, it is competitive, and I obviously progressed from there to being a teacher, and now the head of learning support. But I suppose I'm looking to give apprentices that opportunity, and I suppose the only way I can do that is by making it sort of the salary more competitive.
The endpoint assessment department that I run at ELS, we're currently recruiting an apprentice. So we linked up with our local training provider, the local college, who are a grade 1 outstanding college for their apprenticeships. And we worked with them before Christmas to produce an advert on the .gov website for recruit an apprentice. And that was quite straightforward. I found that quite easy to follow. So it's good for me because I've done the whole apprenticeship journey from the apprentice through as the training provider, employer, and an endpoint assessment organisation. And the college that we're working with has been actually very good at sort of getting that advert out there. They've come back in contact to say we've got a few applicants. So I'm actually really excited about taking on an apprentice for the full length of their programme, to give them the support. They, like yourselves, they will have the apprentices will have to go to college. So, and that will be for their maths and English, which I'm assuming is probably the same as what your apprentices do as well. Is that for maths and English, or all of that?
Skills, maths and English, yeah. So, but interestingly, we've gone through the recruiting process ourselves only recently, and perhaps not had as much success, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Just disappointingly, I mean, we had, I just almost feel that the apprentices, the potential apprentices, have got lots that they can learn that can sell themselves a lot better when they come to an organisation in terms of interview technique and the information that they include on their CVs. And disappointingly, the first round of interviews, we were looking for an LSA, having lost. So if I take a step back, in September, we started with 3 apprentices, one of whom left at October half term because the demands of the role were just too much, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And we've been trying since then to recruit another. The first round of interviews, only one of the candidates out of 3 turned up. 2 of them dropped out at the last moment, and I just wondered whether many are just wanting to sort of apply for the jobs because they need to in order to get the benefits, and so it's using up a lot of people's time by doing that. The third candidate then dropped out after the position was offered. We then had a second round of interviews, and again the quality of the applicants, I was desperately trying to recruit one of these individuals, but they just didn't have the basic skills for us to start with. So I'm trying to get across, it's quite a frustrating process.
Yeah, and I can remember being a training provider, and we had our own recruitment department that would work extremely hard with apprentices, and quite often you might get an apprentice that does very well at an interview or a screening process, and then either just doesn't turn up, or they might stay for a while and then leave. And like you, I know I want an apprentice that is fully committed, who is going to both meet their own goals and aspirations, but also meet the needs of the employer as well, and our needs and things like that. So far we've got 2 apprentices who have put their names forward for a role to support the team. But I would like to see more. So also I'm thinking of having to put out some adverts, because does your training provider screen them for you, or do you do the whole process? They do. Okay, same with us then.
It's a short list.
We've just had a question come in. Let me just see if Sonia, who's managing the webinar. Sonia, can you just let me know what that question is? I can't see. Just bear with me one moment.
So the question came from Keith. Keith thought that he's listening to us live. He's just saying that he's involved in a program that requires personnel of a very high intellectual standard. Are there any mechanisms for the employer to select appropriate apprentices for inclusion on such a program?
When you involve, if you involve a training provider to help you screen your apprentices, they go through the requirements of the role. So they will ask you any sort of really essential information: what kind of level of skills, what apprenticeship program are these people going to be working towards? Because if Keith is looking at taking on a brand new member of staff and putting them on an apprenticeship, if it's like a level 4 maybe, or even a level 5, there's automatically going to be a need there for I promise much higher skills, much more competence. And if he's thinking of possibly upskilling his own staff, he won't need to use a training provider. He could recruit himself an apprentice, in other words, either taking an existing member of staff or putting an advert out for a new apprentice. I hope that answers his question, but it's down for him as the line manager to stipulate what that job role is all about. Are there any risks in there he needs to consider that apprentice needs to be aware of, or any extra training? So, for example, for ELS, our apprentices that come in will need to go through security clearance because of the type of company we are and the kind of work that we do. So he just needs to think about, if he was taken on a normal member of staff, what specifics are there that he's going to need to satisfy, and look at any kind of risk assessments possibly, or if, like I said, if the training provider is going to support, make them fully aware of what the actual job role is, because they also might advise Keith on what's suitable or what might not be suitable in terms of taking on certain candidates. So thank you, Keith, for that question. And I can just see your a message come and say Keith is happy with the answer. Brilliant, thanks, Keith. So if an employer came to you and said they were thinking of taking on an apprentice, what would you say to that employer?
Definitely go for it. But would I take on 3 apprentices at the same level to do the same role? No, I wouldn't. So I'd almost, in the situation I'm in now, I'm very fortunate I've got a very experienced member of staff. But if I'm taking on 3 apprentices who've never been learning support assistants in a school, I think the impact on the work environment would counteract the benefits that we would have from taking on an apprentice.
Okay, so that leads me on to my next question that I wanted to ask. As an employer who recruits apprentices, what benefits would you say it brings to the employer?
So, I mean, it goes without saying that, you know, it's a more cost-effective, it's a sort of a cheaper option, but arguably, is it cheaper because of the time involved with staff training that apprentice? So that's sort of, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I think it's the main benefits. I think at the end of the day, Warminster School prides itself on being a community and working together and supporting not only the parents, pupils, staff within that community, but the community outside the school as well. And I think we've got a moral responsibility to give these opportunities often to our young people so that we can develop them, give them sort of a start in life. And, you know, in the current climate, never has that been so important. You know, a young person now trying to start out a career in whatever field, education being one of them, you know, it's tough out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that we just recruit young people, but you know, that's just an example to sort of illustrate how important it is that the apprenticeship programs are given support and given the buy-in from employers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You know, you've talked a lot there about the benefits, and you've also touched on the challenges. So my next question was going to be, you know, what do you think your biggest challenges are with the apprentice? And you touched on if you take in 3 at the same level, on the same role, the same standard, and then actually that can counteract because the amount of time you then need to invest. I mean, are there any other challenges you want to touch on that you've experienced as an employer?
I think what I've certainly found this year is it's been very emotional for our apprentices. You know, different circumstances, from managing families alongside their role to managing a commute and difficult circumstances outside the workplace. So it's not just a case of somebody comes in the door, you you have a chat with them and you get them going with their job. It's the pastoral wrap that goes with that. And I think it's really important as an employer that you've got to be there to support your apprentices. Yeah. But you know, I wouldn't be lying to say that I've had a lot of, you know, tea and tissues in my office when things don't necessarily go according to plan. And do you know what? For someone that's come out of school, you know, a couple of years out of school, to then go back into the school environment and be thrown in a class of, say, a group of year 11s who are under their own pressures and stress with, you know, coursework, exams. That isn't, you know, it's not an easy task. Our apprentices are involved in, I'll give you an example, our apprentices are involved in supporting exams, and some of our learners may need a reader or a scribe, and that is one of the roles that we'd expect our apprentices to do with training. But if you're just out of school, having done your GCSEs, and then you're next to an individual and you're reading and scribing for them, and you're responsible for their GCSE, you may feel yourself responsible for their GCSE results, and that's quite a lot of pressure. So, you know, that's, I think, a challenge that faces our apprentices, but also sort of has an impact then on the employer.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually gobsmacked when I was looking at some statistics on the .gov website. So last year, 319 apprentices started their apprenticeships. And today, roughly, now bearing in mind these stats are a few weeks out of date now, there were 740,000 apprentices actually in training, which is, I think, it's a huge amount. I think potentially that's lower than it's been in previous years as well. And the other shocking statistic that I saw was that between March and July last year, so when the whole COVID thing hit, when we went into lockdown, by November, I'm sure this is right, so by November, 1,033 apprentices had been withdrawn from their programme, not by their wish, this is by employers who had withdrawn them because of COVID. They had lost their business and their business was drying up, and they'd had to let these apprentices go. And I watched quite a heartwarming interview with an apprentice, or heartbreaking interview really, with an apprentice on a web page who was loving their apprenticeship, loving their job, but due to COVID, due to the, I suppose, customer numbers dropping, they'd lost their job. And so in November, we already had over 1,000 apprentices who were sat, you know, in limbo. They've lost their job, they've lost their apprenticeship. And so I know that the government have worked very, very hard to try and get employers to re-employ them. And there are all these different incentives at the moment by the government for this. And especially for employers who are taking on apprentices. You've got the £2,000 incentives, £1,500 incentives. And I've been talking to employers, educating them on that, signposting them to the information to try and encourage them to take on apprentices, because they too can, you know, you can claim this incentive. The apprentice has to be on contract by the end of March, but employers can actually apply for the incentive by the end of April. So the government are trying really hard to get these apprentices re-employed and just generally give those opportunities to people out there. So I just wanted to touch on that really, but I think we're actually almost out of time. So I'll just touch on the Apprenticeship Week for people who are watching and listening. Apprenticeship Week this year is between the 8th and the 14th of February. ELS will be doing their thing, doing their webinars. We're also planning to do our interviews for our new apprentices. So thank you so much, Ange, for today, for coming on and for supporting our coffee and chat, and, you know, enabling us and our listeners and viewers to hear all about you and the school. It's fascinating, and thank you so much for taking on all the apprentices that you do and the work that you do with them, because that's really lovely to hear.
You're welcome, and pleasure.
Thank you. And for our listeners and viewers, ELS run the coffee and chat every Friday from 1 o'clock. Please follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. to keep up to date with our coffee and chat sessions. So that brings today to a close. So thank you very much for your time.